Welcome to Telesur. This is From the South, from our studios in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Let's begin. Pope Francis has officially awarded sainthood to late Salvadoran Archbishop Oscar Arnulfo Romero. The ceremony was witnessed by thousands in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. During El Salvador's brutal military dictatorship, Romero called for an end to human rights abuses. He was murdered 38 years ago by a death squad as he was giving Mass in San Salvador. Thousands of people attended Oscar Romero's canonization ceremony at the Vatican, including more than 7,000 Salvadorians.
It is a historic day for Latin American worshippers. This morning, the Piazza da San Pietro was full of followers that were excited and joyful before the canonization of Monsignor Romero. Packed full of people, including pilgrims and devotees of saints. This is how full the St. Peter's Square was on Sunday. Papa Francisco spoke about Pope John Paul VI and, of course, Oscar Arnulfo Romero.
It is so beautiful. Monsignor Romero is among him and all the other saints who left the world behind to give his life to the gospel and his heart to Jesus and his brothers.
Among the pilgrims, flags and apparel designed specially for the event, a festive mood at the Vatican to honor the beloved Salvadoran and heroic Latin American figure.
The father, the friend, the big brother, who stood by the Salvadorian people during the hardest and the most difficult moments, when we were slaughtered, when nobody showed mercy toward us. Monsignor Romero was the only one who raised his voice. Today, Saint Oscar Romero.
Joy and also solemnity among the thousands of people who attended the ceremony, among them 7,000 Salvadorans, according to figures from the church who came from El Salvador or the diaspora, all united with the same spirit and sentiment.
We are very pleased that the Roman Catholic Church has finally and officially acknowledged the great man he was, and he died believing in people, in justice for the ones who need it. It's something that inspires us.
Not only were Latin American people present, but people from around the world, including from Spain, where the now saint has gained a large and devoted following.
Well, it's very emotional, particularly yesterday when I arrived here to the square with this atmosphere, to see that he's finally being recognized by the church and by the entire world. And so really, I've just spent the day in tears.
The faithful have waited 7 months since Pope Francis announced the canonization of Monsignor Romero back in March. 7 months of waiting for these faithfuls has certainly been worth it, with all the excitement they felt today.
That was Eduardo Marin from the Vatican. And hundreds of Salvadorians back at home gathered to celebrate the canonization. They filled the streets of capital San Salvador to watch the event, which was broadcasted live on a large television screen at Gerardo Barrios Square. The Salvadorian Archbishop dedicated his life to serving the poor, and he was always also committed to the fight for social justice.
I'm proud that a Salvadorian prophet is canonized because it is something historical that may not happen again in our country.
This is a very important moment for Salvadorians to take away examples of how Monsignor Romero served to the people. To be able to choose and always defend the causes that are trampled by people who want to be above everyone.
Now to Argentina, where the 33rd Annual National Women's Summit has taken place this weekend. Our correspondent in Argentina, Sabrina Roth, brings us more on this summit, where thousands of women gathered to promote reproductive health programs, legislation against gender violence, and decriminalization of abortion.
During the 33rd National Women's Summit in the city of Cherleu, participants staying in a local public school say they were targeted by a group throwing stones at them. They say the police were nowhere to be found. Robberies have also been reported. Organizers of the summit sent out an official statement condemning the local government for not following safety procedures to guarantee their safety, although assurances were given but not followed. They hold Chubut's governor responsible. Participants say under these circumstances, progress is very difficult.
That was Sabrina Roth from Argentina. And we spoke to lawyer and political scientist Nancy Medina about that National Women's Summit in Argentina. Here's what she said.
that women's movement have a huge impact on society, and when you have that kind of when the social movement have that kind of impact, of course it influence on public policies and in the government agenda. That's why one of the main reasons that this year was treated in the Chamber of Senate, the decriminalization of abortion, for example. So I think the women's movement in Argentina are really enriched, a really rich movement. And
Coming up, more stories. Meanwhile, you can follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and my personal account, Carla G. Telesur. We'll be back.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
We continue with news. The streets of Sao Paulo in Brazil filled with supporters of presidential candidate Fernando Haddad on Sunday. Marchers showed their support for Haddad as he's running against far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro. Since Election Day on October 7th, violence and political persecution against supporters of the Workers' Party has increased. And Haddad has accused Bolsonaro of fostering violence. He said violent incidents linked to Bolsonaro supporters have been on the rise in various parts of Brazil. Early this week, a man was stabbed to death in a bar for repeatedly shouting in support of the Workers' Party. And a transgender woman was badly beaten by Bolsonaro supporters on the streets. This is what Haddad said about that.
He always incited violence. He has a lifetime of inciting violence. This is a person whose hero was one of the biggest torturers on the continent. There is the person who's leading the opinion polls, but he will lose.
Public university students in Colombia have threatened to start an open-ended strike. They want Congress to pass the national budget. Students say they will stop going to class until more resources for public universities are guaranteed. They say that the government's proposal for this year's budget is unclear. They want new policies that benefit public institutions. Tensions have erupted during an opposition protest in Nicaragua. The country has been under political turmoil since mid-April, when anti-government protests first started. The government has been looking to start talks with the opposition to put an end to the crisis.
They have bloated Nicaragua. They have kidnapped Bismarck and keep calling for a march. Not for peace, but for blood. That's why they want blood.
Over 2,000 Honduran citizens started to walk with the hopes of crossing into the United States. Many say increasing violence and decreasing job opportunities are the reason they decided to migrate. The plan to cross a total 2,000 kilometers filled with dangers, both natural and human-made.
There are a lot of shortages here and a lot of crime. We cannot live here anymore.
Last year I went to apply for a visa and they didn't give it to me. They denied it. So now I will take advantage of this opportunity to see if I can do it.
An environmental court in Chile has ordered the closure of a Canadian gold mine in the Atacama region. The mine is located at the border with Argentina and had previously operated in both countries. But following the court order, Canadian mining company Barrick will only be able to work in Argentina. Environmentalists have called this decision a great victory. Still in Chile, clashes erupted during a demonstration by members of the indigenous Mapuche community. Police fired water cannons against protesters. They were marching in Santiago to defend their rights and to urge the government to return the lands that were stolen from them. Social organizations are protesting in Argentina to demand the release of social leader Milagro Sala. She has been in detention for over 1,000 days. The organizations gather in Buenos Aires, and Sala has said that she rejects her arrest and that authorities have used her case to persecute other social leaders. In an exclusive interview, Telesur spoke with Milagro Sala. Let's listen to what she said.
These people in power, Macri and his gang, the truth is that they are a gang of delinquents, a group of businessmen and their families that are getting rich at the expense of those who have less. It took them 2 years. In 2 years and 10 months, they have destroyed our country, they have put us in debt, they have backtracked advances in education and health. Everything has receded. It is astounding how they have hurt our country and how they have destroyed it. The country is no longer ruled by those who cast their vote. Great powers such as the International Monetary Fund and neoliberal interests are now in charge of our country. They want to take out the Argentine flag and they want to raise a colonizing flag.
A second flight to leave Buenos Aires with Venezuelan migrants landed in Caracas. This as part of the Venezuelan government Return to the Homeland program.
For Antonio, going back to his birthplace now seems realistic. He's one of many Venezuelans returning so he can be reunited with his family.
The main reason is that I miss my family so much, but I also miss my country after being here for a long time. For me, it is important to analyze Argentina's political and social situation. I am against the abuse and discrimination against not only Venezuelans, but also against other migrants.
This journey is taking a group of 86 Venezuelans back. All they want is to go home after failing to find work in Argentina.
I'm so thankful. Since last year I was looking forward to going home, but I couldn't. Now my dream is being fulfilled and I'm here to go back to my beautiful country.
I am really excited because I wanted to go back so long ago. Although I owe a lot to Argentina, my situation just got really difficult. I know that Venezuela needs us all to work for it, because it won't come through as a nation without us.
So far, priority has been given to Venezuelans with financial issues and desperately needed to go back to the Bolivarian Republic. Many of them lived on the streets.
Unlike last time, we see more young families. Most of them have little children from 2 to 7 years of age. The parents have professional backgrounds. Although there are some elderly who came to join their children, unfortunately, their children can't support them. There are families that live on the streets.
Sent by the Bolivarian government, the airplane took off from this Ezeiza International Airport, carrying 86 passengers back to where their heart is.
Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has confirmed that his government is achieving economic growth and sustainability. According to Holness, interest rates continue to decrease while employment is increasing. He added that by the end of the year, debt to gross domestic product will fall below 100%.
We're making investments in
We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. We'll leave you with a video.
Infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
At least 15 civilians have been killed and other 20 have been injured in Yemen. Houthi rebels have blamed airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition. This coalition used air power to oust the rebels from much of the country's south, but the Houthis have held on to Sana'a and the key Red Sea port of Hodeidah. Jordan and Syria have agreed to the reopening of the border crossing of Nasib, which has been closed for 3 years due to the civil war in Syria. The border crossing, an important trade route for the whole Middle East, has been reopened this Sunday, after the Syrian army ensured its control over the region. Following this announcement, the Iraqi and Syrian authorities have come together to discuss the early reopening of the border crossings between these countries. The Syrian government has urged the United Nations to put an end to the illegal U.S. presence and other foreign forces in Syria. The Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has denounced a new white phosphorus attack by the U.S.-led coalition in the eastern city of Ayin, which has left an undetermined number of victims among the civilian population. Syria calls for an international investigation into these crimes. In Liberia, a documentary is shocking the community, which is revealing that the head of a foundation had been systematically raping girls. Mackintosh Johnson, the co-founder of More Than Me, died of AIDS in 2016, raising alarms that he could have infected his victims, some as young as 10. He was facing a trial after some of the girls came forward. The foundation was aimed to protect vulnerable girls from a life of sexual exploitation. Liberians are now calling for justice against the founder, who allegedly knew about Johnson's crimes.
I just want this new government, this pro-poor government, to hear our cries, to be able to sympathize with our girls, our Liberian girls. They are being raped. They are being abused, not only by Katie Miller and her hoodlums, but by the NGO world, by different people that's coming into the country.
Now to South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa attended a ceremony to return almost 5,000 hectares of land in KwaZulu-Natal. The ownership will be transferred to the local community. Agrarian reform is a key issue in national politics and was discussed in this meeting. The country suffered from land dispossession after World War I and during the 1940s when white farmers expanded their commercial cane and timber production.
We are making history. We are celebrating today the return of the land to our people in this area. This is history in the making.
Over 3,000 people have signed a petition against a planned statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Malawi's commercial capital of Blantyre. The petitioners, calling themselves the Gandhi Must Fall movement, claim that Gandhi, who spent his early years in South Africa, was racist and that he'd done nothing for the country. Work on the statue began 2 months ago on a road named after Gandhi. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni visited the site where 43 people died in a landslide that caused a river to burst its banks. During the visit, Museveni condemned local authorities for failing to stop people from building on the bank of rivers. Over 800 people have been displaced in the disaster caused by heavy rains.
And we say leave 50 meters on either side for the river. But the local government don't implement it. The people are also not sensitized, so end up losing people. Being near the flood plain of the river or near the cliffs is very, very dangerous.
A blind, unemployed man fell to his death in Morocco. He was holding a sitting protest on the roof of a government building to demand the creation of jobs in its public sector. Sabir al-Haloui died on his way to the hospital in an ambulance. He was among dozens of unemployed graduates who have been protesting since September to demand more jobs. The sit-in was organized by the National Coordination of Visually Impaired Graduates. They had previously threatened to throw themselves off the roof if their demands were not met. The government in Zimbabwe has arrested trade union leaders for organizing a protest against economic hardships. Demonstrators were also protesting a new tax on electronic transactions. One of those arrested was Peter Mutasa, the president of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. In an exclusive interview, we spoke with Peter Mutasa. Let's listen to what he said about the situation in Zimbabwe.
The fiscal policy is also adding a 2% for every transaction that you transact electronically in the banks and outside the bank in the shops. You are charged an additional 2% per every dollar. And everyone is complaining because that has had an effect of raising prices beyond the reach of the ordinary man in the street and the ordinary woman in the street.
And after his detention, Mutasa dismissed allegations that his union was being used by the opposition movement for democratic change.
the government is not being sincere in its position that we are being used by the opposition, because this issue about the monetary policy and the fiscal policy has affected everyone around the country. Businesses are complaining, ordinary citizens are complaining, the people in the informal sector whom we don't organize are complaining. So this is a legitimate claim, a legitimate argument that we are raising.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened Hamas with strong actions after new protests on the Gaza Strip. Over 200 Palestinians, including children, have been killed by Israeli security forces since March this year.
Hamas apparently has not internalized the message. If they do not stop the violent attacks against us, they will be stopped in a different way, and it will be painful, very painful.
Still in Israel, a U.S. student of Palestinian descent has been placed in police custody at Tel Aviv airport for being the president of a small association of students in favor of Palestine. 22-year-old Lara Al-Qasem was denied entry in Tel Aviv. Prime Minister Netanyahu justified the arrest of the young woman, claiming that it was common for countries to decide who enters and who doesn't.
Would that it were true, I don't know. But every country and every democracy, and many democracies, have special arrangements where they decide who to let in and who not to let in. If you come in and you're virulently against America and you try to come into the United States, there's a good chance you won't be let in if people know that in advance. That's also true of many of the European democracies. It's true of the democracy called Israel.
The Turkish government has accused Saudi Arabia of not cooperating with the investigation into the disappearance of a journalist inside its Istanbul consulate. Information leaked to the media says officials believe Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside the consulate. A Saudi delegation is in Turkey and is expected to have talks with Turkish authorities. The Italian city of Trieste has been transformed to the world's capital of sailing. Nearly 3,000 boats have competed in the race of Barcolana, the largest regatta in the world. The boat Spirit of Porto Piccolo, with Furio Venusi at the helm, has won this 50th edition. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but this and other stories, as you know, you can find them on our website. We are at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all the latest information on the new saint of Latin America. So go check it out. And you can also follow us on social media. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and until the next time, thank you for watching Telesur, connecting the Global South.